The aftermath of the new game of the century, Alabama's win over Georgia. Trey Wallace of Outkick was there. He'll give us his firsthand account of what it was like being there and if Bama truly is the best team in the country.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what's up, everybody? Welcome to Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. Shout out to our everydayers. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. And today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com today to get started. All right, we got to recap some of the action from the weekend. And as I was going through my Rolodex and going, who would be great to have on this week, I noticed our buddy Trey Wallace was there in Tuscaloosa. He saw all the madness firsthand. So, Trey, welcome in, buddy. I'll start there. You were there in Tuscaloosa, an epic showdown between Georgia and Alabama. Take us inside, even before the kickoff. What was it like? The ambiance, Trump's there, Kid Rock is there. Miss Terry is the guest picker. It had to be madness out there.
It was such a wild day, and I'd gotten there early just because I wanted to beat the storms, because where I live at, I have to drive through, so I wasn't driving through the storms. So I got in there like 2 days early, and even on Thursday and Friday, it was pretty wild. A lot of Georgia fans coming into town, beating the storms as well. Hope everybody's doing well, by the way, from that. I know there's a lot of destruction going on. Prayers to them, but man, you could feel it, brother. Like you could feel that there was something big on the horizon. And I got Georgia fans barking in my hotel at 11 o'clock at night at the bar the night before. I'm like, damn, I'm not getting any sleep. This is going to be a long night. And then we're waking up and you got game day going on and the quad's packed and Miss Terry's there and everybody's having a good time, while at the same time, I'm also have to go back to the car and watch the Ole Miss Kentucky game, second half. So I'm literally, you know how the business works. Like, we don't have where to go. We got to sit in the car and we got to stream it through our phones and all that. So writing stories. And then you get to, I've been to Tuscaloosa for so many of these big games, and it felt different this time around for some reason. And I'm not trying to compare it to LSU, Alabama, none of that. But from like an Alabama, Georgia standpoint, this was magnificent to watch. And then when you're sitting there also, Chris, at the same time, you're like, all right, well, the former president, excuse me, is going to arrive before kickoff. Well, that doesn't happen. So you've got chaos. When I say chaos, I mean chaos as in long lines to get in security into the game. They wanted everybody there an hour and a half earlier than they would be there usually. So that was a problem with Secret Service and Homeland Security, guarding it. So you got folks trying to get in there. They're agitated. They want to just get into their seats. And then, Trump doesn't arrive till second quarter. So it's like, oh man, all right, went through all of that for this guy to show up in the second quarter. and then, but by the time he gets there, it's like, wait a minute, what did Alabama just do? Like there are 4 touchdowns. Like what? And it happens like that. And you're like, okay, and then some folks are like, maybe this guy should leave. Georgia starts coming back and they start coming back, like, get him out of here. But just the whole thing, and I think what made the environment even crazier, because it was already nuts, is the fact that what Alabama did in that first quarter. I mean, when you go up like that, and you have a quarterback in Jalen Milroe that's running wild on the Georgia defense, who didn't guard the edges well enough, in my opinion. That's one of the reasons why. But you add all of that in, and by the second quarter, man, that place was on fire. And I'm looking at, and I went to the Georgia sideline and stood. And I was doing photography for the game this weekend, so I'm shooting the game, and so I make my way kind of over near the Georgia sidelines, and I'm looking at them and the players, and the way they're reacting, and I don't want to say it caught me off guard, but you had players slapping each other on the pads, low fives and whatnot, coaches coming over, like they were still like mentally there, down 4 touchdowns, and then they got one, whatever, on the board before, and you got to have time 37. So when they came out in that second half, Chris, I know we'll get into it, but I just saw a different team, like mentally on the sidelines. I saw a team jumping around on the first series defensively. I don't know what, look, we have heard some leaked Kirby Smart locker room speeches. I don't know what he said in this one, brother, but Georgia came out guns a-blazing, fired up, and then you look at what they did. I have to give a props to Georgia for not laying down. They could have easily laid down, not got their stars hurt once it, potentially kind of, you know how it goes, man, in this business, in football. But, man, they fought back into it, and we got one hell of a fourth quarter I don't think I'll ever forget, ever. And I'm glad I got a lot of it on video and photo.
Yeah, it's a weird vibe because I've got Georgia friends and Alabama friends, and the trash talk is gone. I mean, it's 30-7 at halftime, and the Alabama fans are just like, the red wave is just roll tide this, and Nick Saban, who we don't even need him, is we were kind of joking during the game. I think Peter Burns even tweeted it. Is Alabama even better post Nick Saban? Like, are they a well-rounded team, better offense? But it's as much as the trash talking was there, Georgia certainly, to get back into this thing. To your point, like, credit them. I mean, I know they're one of the best teams in the country, but any other team would have rolled up and died. Carson Beck had the worst first half of his career. For him to bounce back and play like he did in the second half, I think he deserves a lot of credit. I was mixed yesterday. I was like trying to criticize him, but like, you got to give him credit too for getting his team back into it.
I mean, Chris, the moxie in the second half is what stood out to me. The fact that he was still going out there and they were trying to. There was a point in the second half where he was 3 for 6, but 2 of those were for touchdowns. So you're like, okay, all right. Like, this kid, he could have gotten rattled, on the offensive line when they didn't have Tate Ratledge. That hurt them, in my opinion, in a strong way. And then when you also look at the situation where Georgia, they don't have a Lab McConkey this year. They don't have a Brock Bowers this year. And so when you're having to dig in and you find the guys that you think it's going to make it work, and that was a team effort. And I know that's easy to say, but when I say that's for them to make that comeback the way that they did, and for the defense to stay in the same mindset, and the offense, okay, we're within 17 points. All right, cool. Let's get another stop. Okay, snap. We're within 10 points. Okay, this is getting a little crazy. And then, Chris, you get to the point where Georgia took the lead, and I'm sitting there and I'm looking at another guy, and I'm sitting there shooting the game, and I just looked at the other guy and said, this thing's a wrap. Georgia just came back all the way. Like, Georgia's finishing this. Like, there's no way the 17-year-old phenom Ryan Williams is going to do this Space Jam looking moves for a 75-yard touchdown. And brother, it was like there was an earthquake that just started going off inside Bryant-Denny, because when that pass went up in the air, and I'm sitting there, I'm like, well, dang, there's 2 men right there. Like, that's going to get knocked down. Like, he does that spin around catch, and then, him going to the end zone. And I was sitting right there watching him come my way, Chris, and he ripped off his mouthpiece. Like, that for some reason, like, that kind of, I noticed that. I took a picture of that during the game. And I'm going to post that, actually. I forgot to. But he took out his mouthpiece, and he was just smiling. He was dancing. I was like, that just happened. Like, one play, Alabama takes the lead. Now, after everything that Georgia's been through and fighting back and winning and taking the lead and whatnot, now they got to come back and try to do it again. And I was like, okay, I thought it was over. One play showed me it didn't. And but kind of, to put a bow on what you were talking about in your question about Carson, for him to even lead them down the field and get them in range to throw that pass in the end zone, that showed me how much I think this kid really has it. And I know folks are going to look at Milroe and be like, oh, man, Milroe, awesome game. Look at how much his draft stock went up. But the way I look at it also is, look what Carson Beck did to get them down to the 25-yard line with a chance to throw that pass. And I think so. It came up short, interception. But overall, hat tip to Alabama for winning the way that they did, and also not falling into quicksand when Georgia scored that touchdown and take the lead, because that could have shook a number of teams. But the fact that they pulled it out, man, I think the crazy part of it is, brother, I think we can take a lot from this game from Georgia's side and from Alabama's side.
Yeah, it's funny. I went back and rewatched some of the game this morning, and let me tell you, just the thought I had, And, as we see Dylan Bell coming down with the catch, it's like, oh my God, Georgia's about to take the lead here. But this is a thought, and again, hindsight's 2020. Right. I look back at it now and wonder, should he have gone down maybe near the goal line? It's 2:31 to go. Make Bama burn their timeouts, eat clock, and take the lead with less time. I know Bama scores immediately, and it ends up Georgia has the chance to then go down and try to tie it. But, just the thought I had was maybe you go down there, eat clock, and don't give them a chance to answer.
It's like we've seen this numerous times in the NFL. You know what I mean? Where a running back will get down to the 1 yard line and then try to fall down where his momentum doesn't push him over the goal line. Yeah, I mean, that could have worked because you could have put them in a different circumstance. You got to burn the timeouts. You got to put yourself in a situation where, okay, our offensive line can get the 1 yard needed or whatever to make a play happen. And so I think there are a number of situations and plays in that game that Kirby and Kalen would like back. And when we're talking about their OCs and DCs, and I get that part too. But I do think that, I think, would Bobo call things differently? Okay. Would Schumann defensively in the first half, probably get up on the edges a little bit more? Absolutely. And then, with Kalen DeBoer, to me, a lot of people are like, no, he didn't go conservative in the second half. I'm like, all right, well, that third quarter felt pretty conservative, and I tried to make a comparison. I was like, it probably didn't come off right on social media because people take social media and read it into 18 different things. I'm trying to say one, but it felt like the week before when I was in Norman, Oklahoma, where Tennessee had taken a lead over Oklahoma, pretty substantial, and they just relied on their defense in the second half. They knew that, okay, let's just run the football here, see what we can do and force Georgia offense to do something that they hadn't done in the first half. So, again, we can second guess, we can look back on it, but I do think Georgia, comes out of this game a better football team. And I think Alabama comes out of this game a better football team. And I really hope we get another game this year between them two.
All right, more Trey Wallace here in just a sec. More with Trey Wallace here in just a second, but want to remind you guys, it is time to highlight our Roy Player of the Week. And we've been talking about Roy. If you haven't heard about them yet, they are a new platform that lets fans make contributions directly to their favorite athletes. You can download the Roy app on iOS or Android and enter our referral code LOCKEDON, and you'll automatically be entered into a sweepstakes to win $5,000 cash. No purchase necessary, void where prohibited. But this week, we have selected Kentucky quarterback Brock Vandagriff because of his great performance on the road in the upset of Ole Miss. His 63-yard bomb to Berrien Brown on a fourth down was the biggest play in the game that set them up for the go-ahead score, and it was tremendous. And if everyone likes to support a player, I would encourage you to support Brock Vandagriff. Like we said, we're giving Brock $100 on Roy. If you were impressed as we were with his performance Saturday, you could show him some love too. Just hop on Roy, throw in a few bucks. If everyone pitches in just $10, it will add up fast for a player like Vandagriff. Now you have the chance to show your appreciation for Brock and his standout performance this week, as well as what he will continue to bring to the Kentucky program. If you want to support a player, you can do so. Change the game with Roy. Download the app, find your favorite player, and start supporting them today. Continue our conversation with our buddy Trey Wallace of Outkick, and hitting on some SEC topics with him. One more on the game of the new game of the century. I guess that's what people are pinning it. You were right there in Tuscaloosa for Georgia, Alabama. Again, rewatching it this morning, I watched that pass from Carson Beck, and Xavier Brown, a freshman, just makes an incredible play. As I rewatched it, though, I go, should Colby Young have fought more, pull him down, take the offensive pass interference, because the interception ends the game. You're done. Right. Looking back in hindsight, I'm wondering, man, should he have done more there?
Well, it was a duck. In my opinion, Carson threw up a duck. I get what he was trying to do, try to find that one-on-one on the outside, but it was, he just tossed it up. He was looking for Young to make a play, and I completely understand that, but he also threw it to the short end of the end zone. So it made it easier for Xavier to go over and snatch the ball away. So, dissecting that play, I've watched that play numerous times from different angles. And you look at it and, maybe it's more of a back corner of the end zone type of throw, but at the same time, you're right. Like, I think it was just too late, for Young to try to rip him down. I think he realized it too late that, the situation was, he wasn't going to be able to get in front of him. And Xavier came out and I thought just made a great play. But you are right. We do see that sometimes during these type of plays, in college football where the offensive guy is going to take the penalty. Okay, back yourself up 15 yards, but at least you have another shot at it. And I think it's a learning lesson. I think it's a learning lesson. And I think that, when you got two young players, and I'm talking about Ryan Williams, you talk about Xavier, you just made the interception. These are kids, man. These are kids out here making those type of plays in big games like that. I mean, you tip your cap to them, and you have to realize that I think Carson Beck would have loved to maybe have overthrown the ball out of the end zone, but at the same time, he took a shot, man, and God bless him. He had led his squad back to that point, and he took a shot, and it came up short. And I think after seeing Kirby Smart standing on the field and making sure to take the towels off the players' heads as they left the field. Some players had towels on their heads that were looking down. He ripped them off, slapping them on the pads. High five. Kirby Smart, and he knows what he's doing, but in that situation, Kirby Smart knew exactly where that game could take them in the future. And I think he was trying to send that message to him.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought, too, because this is the playoff era now, Trey. I mean, a loss does not, BCS era, you'd be dead. I mean, they're like, oh, God, no way we bounce back from this. Yeah. If you're Georgia, I mean, you have less room for error here. I mean, I think some of us still think 10-2 as an SEC team gets you in the playoff. But for Georgia, you beat Texas in Austin a few weeks. You have the upper hand on them. Bama still has to go to Tennessee, to LSU. I mean, Georgia's still very much alive in this thing, and it could go one of two ways. I've seen some people saying overreaction now. Oh, told you this Georgia team's not very good. They're going to have 3 losses. Or we see this vengeance of a Georgia team where they just run the table. I mean, this thing could go either way.
Guy, I mean, I've had multiple people. I did a mailbag, and I was flooded with DMs and emails like, okay, Georgia's not going to make the playoffs. I said, wait, why? I said, because the same Kentucky team that went into Oxford and beat up on Ole Miss with their defense, took Georgia, down in the fourth quarter. So you're saying Georgia's not good enough in that situation? I get what's ahead for Georgia. I understand it. I get that massive weekend in about 3 weeks where you got Alabama and Knoxville and you got Georgia and Austin, Texas, is going, in my opinion, to define a lot of what we see because divisions are gone now. So, winning percentage in the SEC, okay, it's like, all right, who's 1-2, and then who could be potentially that third team to get in from the conference? I think Georgia's going to be okay. And I say that to say this, like, Georgia can hang with Texas. Like, I think Georgia defensively, yes, it's going to be a struggle on the back end, but I think offensively I've seen weaknesses, in Texas. And by the way, who's Texas played offensively that can really challenge them? Like, it wasn't Mississippi State. It damn sure wasn't Michigan. Right. So, like, who have they played to really challenge them on offense and get them into a shootout? I think we're going to find out a lot over the next month before that first week of November. And you nailed it, man. I mean, I think the schedule, Alabama is going to have tough games. And I think that the same can be said for Georgia, and while everybody's going to be sleeping on those two, Tennessee and Missouri, and while Texas is sitting up here, so you got Georgia, Alabama, and then I think it's going to be like Tennessee, Missouri, potentially fighting for that final spot, and we'll see what happens to Ole Miss because I'm sure we're going to talk about that, but I just feel like they're both in a nice position going forward, but I will admit the next loss could be very interesting when it comes to the playoffs and how they get in.
All right, just a couple other SEC topics here. We're talking with everybody. Trey Wallace of Outkick. How shocked were you that Ole Miss lost to Kentucky? I was saying for weeks, man, you're playing all these high schools. You look awesome, but we don't know how good you are. You haven't been tested. Well, the first time they're tested, man, that was a tough one to take. How shocked were you?
I wasn't like completely shocked because I saw what Kentucky did with Georgia. Like, that was not a fluke. Like, Kentucky's defense is pretty damn stout, in my opinion. And then you go in there and it's like, okay, Ole Miss scores that touchdown, the first touchdown. And then Kentucky just Kentucky put the brakes on Ole Miss and what they were trying to do on offense. And I'm not talking about the last possession for Ole Miss where they were scurrying down the field and Kentucky was playing prevent to not give up the touchdown. They could try to settle for the field goal if that happens, whatever. Look, Mark Stoops, we've seen Mark Stoops win some big games. And we know what big games are in the SEC, rivalry games, whatnot, beating a Georgia would have been very monumental. But then, I think it's even crazier. You go on the road to Oxford and you win in that situation where it's 11 o'clock kickoff. Your offense, we don't know what the heck we're going to get from Kentucky's offense. Let's just be honest. We don't know what Brock Vandagriff is going to show up. And at the same time, folks are like, okay, well, Ole Miss has beat the living hell out of everybody they played. But did you go and watch the teams that they played? Did you look? Like, I know you've seen the points. I get that part. But hell, South Alabama, my school scored 87 points on Northwestern State and just got their brains beat in by LSU this past weekend. So what I'm getting at is you got to look at the details. And I think Kentucky, man, they just came out after that first touchdown they gave up. They popped them in the mouth. And the fact that when they kept it at 10-10, and it was like 13-13, and Ole Miss is settling for field goals, you're like, okay, this one's Lane might have to pull a trick, to make this happen. What's Trey Harris going to do? And then they take the lead. And then Kentucky's like, okay, cool. We're about to march down the field. And by the way, the cojones on Mark Stoops to finally pull the trigger in a big situation and go for it. Because that was it. I mean, they were, and if we're being honest with each other and everybody out there, like them getting the ball back, I know there was like 3 minutes left, but them getting the ball back was going to be pretty tough. It really took one first down. That game would have been over with. He decides to go for it from his own 18-yard line, on a 4th and 7, and Brock Vandagriff just throws a dime. So after that, I was like, okay. And then there was the second one. The second big cojones moment was when he put the backup quarterback in to run it in for the touchdown. And I know he fumbled and the receiver picked it up. But Mark Stoops made some big boy decisions, and I think he's heard the narrative around him. He doesn't go for the throat certain times. And just an overall great win for Kentucky going forward. I don't expect Kentucky to make the playoffs or anything like that. No offense, Kentucky fans, okay? That was a fantastic win. But for Ole Miss, they got problems, Chris. They got problems. I think the offensive line could be a problem. And I think that Jackson Dart, he looked very uncomfortable in the second half. He did. And he was making some interesting decisions when it comes to passes. And I think the play calling was a little bit, I could use a lot of words, stale, stagnant, conservative, whatever. I just think it was off balance. And I think once Kentucky kept hanging in with them, it caught Ole Miss off guard because they expected to come out in the second half and run them out of the building. Like I've talked to enough people, that was their thinking. And when Kentucky didn't lay down, that was it, man. And so credit to Mark Stoops of Kentucky. It's not going to surprise me if, they pull off one or two big more wins this season. But to go from the high of, having Georgia, at the end of that fourth quarter close one to not finishing it, then a low, but then going to Oxford, Mississippi against the 6th-ranked team in the country and Lane Kiffin, who just, God love him, talks so much trash and whatnot. And for Mark Stoops to do it in the way that they did it, credit to the Wildcats. Ole Miss has a problem, brother, Chris. I mean, I don't know if you agree with me or not, but you got to go to South Carolina this weekend, and then you got to go to Baton Rouge for a night game.
Yeah, well, they haven't
be in trouble.
They haven't won there since 2008. I mean, it's been a while.
What's your opinion? Like, if in your opinion, Ole Miss has to go 2-0 over the next 2 weeks because I look at the remaining part of that schedule, they're probably going to, and I'm just throwing it out there now, like they could win, but I look at the Georgia game as, okay, that could potentially be, that's an L potentially. And then you slip up against another team, maybe like Kentucky, you're screwed. So you have to go to South Carolina and win. And then you got to go to Baton Rouge and win, or this playoff conversation, it's a wrap.
And we'll see what Oklahoma looks like. If Michael Hawkins, they're committed to him, if he keeps getting better week by week, that's a tough one. At Arkansas is like the ultimate wild card. Like if Taylor Green plays his butt off and doesn't turn the ball over, they're super dangerous.
That's a trap game for Tennessee this weekend, by the way.
Yeah. More Trey Wallace in just a second, but want to remind you guys, today's episode presented to you by FanDuel, and we're calling all NFL fans, college fans, you can start your season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And right now at FanDuel, you will get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet, and plenty of action to get in on this weekend. Texas A&M, like we talked about, -1.5 against Mizzou at home. Auburn getting 24.5 on the road at Georgia. Everybody expecting the Georgia Bulldogs to bounce back. That's a big, big number. And then Ole Miss getting 9.5 or -9.5 rather at South Carolina. And a lot of people expected Ole Miss to bounce back, but that is a tough place to play. And South Carolina is 3-1. Going to be a tough one. All those lines you can find over at FanDuel, FanDuel.com. Download the FanDuel app. It is FanDuel.com. Give me thoughts. Does Arkansas give Tennessee any trouble this weekend? I was surprised when I said this line's only 13.5. I was thinking, like, if you'd asked me, I would have said Tennessee at least by 20, 21. Like, I thought on the road, even on the road. They showed they could win on the road at Oklahoma, but it shows you Arkansas is pretty good.
I thought Arkansas played really well against Texas A&M. I thought there was opportunity where they could have won the football game this past weekend. I did. And I think that Taylor Green, I think what they're doing at the running back position and what they're doing on defense, like, you know, I get it. Like, I think I understand a little bit why the line is where it is. Like, I agree with you. I thought it was 13.5, you know, all right, cool. Like 14.5. It's not really a big difference, 1 point, whatever. I do think Arkansas is going to give Tennessee a little bit of fits this weekend in the first half before, Tennessee gets in the groove with the offense. The biggest thing to me is Tennessee's offensive line, because if they show up in Fayetteville with the same offensive line that they finished the game in Norman with, there could be some problems when it comes to protecting Nico. Because if you don't have Hurd and, okay, let's say John Campbell is not fully healthy, you're going to let Nico just sit in the pocket. That's why they went conservative at Oklahoma, is because they weren't going to let Nico just continue getting wrecked, in the backfield. So the offensive line, just watch that this weekend for Tennessee, because Dylan Sampson is such a dynamic running back. He can get to the outside and he can find his path. But yeah, I think this game is competitive. I don't think Tennessee goes in there and just blows Arkansas out. Will they cover the 13.5? I think they do, but I think it comes, in the fourth quarters, I think, when that happens. So night game in Fayetteville, I think, judging by the game that they just played against Texas A&M, I think it showed some life. And I think, with the number 4 team in the country coming to town, it should be an electric atmosphere. So let's, Nico has said he loves playing on the road more than he loves playing at home. Let's see how that looks in Fayetteville this weekend.
And this is what makes the SEC so tough, man. Like, these are those trap games that you penciled in a W before the season, but then you get there and the place is rocking and it's loud. I'm like, this is why the SEC is great, because anybody can beat anybody. It's
the same thing as we could have said when Georgia went to Kentucky, or when LSU went to South Carolina. Like, anything can happen in this conference. And by the way, disclaimer, I'm not saying Vanderbilt will beat Alabama this weekend. Let me just go ahead and throw that out there, since I just said that anything can happen in this conference. But I am saying
is not bad. They can keep it a game, maybe.
I am a Diego fan. I love me some Diego and that whole New Mexico State crew that just came over to Nashville. But at the end of the day, yes, there are – the way the conference is set up this year, Chris, and the scheduling and whatnot, and we could go on and on about this, I think there is an opportunity for some trap games out there for a number of teams. And I think we will see a few more upsets this year that maybe we weren't expecting, like the one we saw in Oxford this past weekend.
All right, I got 2 more for you real quick.
Yeah.
SEC Nation heading to College Station. Aggies, I was surprised that they are a 1.5-point home favorite against Mizzou. I feel like it's a little disrespectful. I think Eli Drinkwitz loves this, because he's like, we keep getting disrespected. We're outside the top 10 to start the season. Like, we played some close games, but we're still undefeated. Like, I think he likes that they're an underdog here. But I don't know, man. It was a good win for A&M. Are we putting the cart before the horse? Is this still like a year or two away from Elko, really having the Aggies roll in. But also Mizzou, man, you were awesome last year. We were saying this year, proved to us you're not a fraud. Big game for them.
And it's an early game, 11 o'clock game. Like that's another one too. Like we talk a lot about times, okay, but that's a factor. I think it all depends on what Marcel Reed does for Texas A&M. If they give him enough time to read the field and be able to scramble outside the pocket, that could cause Missouri some problems. And if you want a way to look at the comparison, go back and look at what Boston College tried to do with Castellones running the ball at quarterback for the Golden Eagles against Missouri, where they found some success. I know the score is a different indicator, and I get that part, but they found some success doing that. I think that's what you're going to see A&M try to do, and that would be the perfect game film to go watch and see how Missouri lined up against Bill O'Brien's squad. So I think it is. I think, look, Eli Drinkwitz loves the disrespect. He would have probably loved it if Vegas come out and said A&M is a 6-point favorite. I look at this overall, though, and I think Brady Cook, Luther Burden, it's a dynamic duo, man. And I don't know if the Texas A&M defense is mature enough. That's not a shot. I'm just being realistic here in their depth to be able to, not hang maybe is the wrong word in this situation, but be able to go for 4 quarters against what Missouri can do on a dime when it comes to passing the ball. And so I it's going to be a test for Missouri for their defense, but at the same time, I think Brady Cook, he's been in these games before, and I think this also sets up for him to go out and, have his big moment this year. So I love where the line is sitting. I'm definitely taking Missouri. Please give me the 1.5 points and whatever. I don't know where it goes before we get to kickoff, but I'm going to take Missouri in this one. But again, Chris, would it surprise me if A&M won this football game? No, it wouldn't surprise me. It's
a great point on Burden too, because I'm looking at it. What good wide receiver has A&M faced yet this year? They really haven't.
Exactly. And so that's the curious, how you going? Okay, you're gonna try to double team him in the secondary. Okay, you're gonna leave 2 more guys open. So to me, it's gonna be fascinating to see Brady Cook read the field. But yeah, looking forward to that game, and it looks like it should be a fun environment, especially again 11 a.m. kickoffs. You don't have to sit around and wait till 7 o'clock and get hammered. So Missouri, maybe they get the brunch crowd on Saturday morning. We'll see.
Well, last one for you, Trey. We certainly appreciate your time, man. Auburn is at Georgia. What do we do here, Auburn? Like, this is a mess for Hugh Freeze. Peyton Thorne finally had his best game of the year, and then he goes and blows it with the most boneheaded throw you could ever make. And it's a pick 6 the other way. How do we stop this from happening if you're Auburn?
Oh, my gosh. Unfortunately, they don't allow quarterbacks to transfer, so he can't pluck one out of the portal right now, Hugh Freeze. Look, speaking with a lot of folks that are connected to the Auburn program, it's a mess, man. And you look at a situation where you had Oklahoma beat. They had Oklahoma beat. You let Michael Hawkins get loose. At quarterback, I got to see him, firsthand out in Norman, 2 weeks ago in that second half. I think Auburn's got a problem because they have somehow got to piece this thing together and get to the end of the season and try to find 5 or 6 wins. Like I'm just being, the fact that I've seen this in college football like a couple times, but it's not been Auburn opened up with 5 straight home games. Okay, like that doesn't happen a lot, and you lost 3 of them, and you didn't play well. Oklahoma was down everyone besides the assistant trainer this past weekend at Norman. You got wide receivers that haven't really touched the field this year that are your star guys because your top 5 are out, and your defense was at times struggling and banged up, and then the fact that Peyton Thorne is like, oh, wait a minute. We might have something here with Peyton. Maybe he's turning the corner, and then slam. There's your interception, and that's just unfortunately for him. That's what folks have come to expect. But I will say this with Hugh Freeze, you've hitched your wagon to Peyton Thorne now. No more flip flopping quarterbacks, brother. Like if you want to develop your guy off the field and whatnot, because there's not going to be any garbage time to remain near the season. Like Auburn, I don't care who they're playing, what patsy. later on in the year. It's not going to be garbage time the way they're playing. So it's like I told somebody else today in a mailbag question. I said, just go ahead and prepare now, man. Like it's going to be a beatdown in Georgia. Georgia's going to be pissed off. Auburn's coming to town. It is a rivalry game. Kirby Smart is going to want to get even more confidence in his team, Chris. And I think they're going to run the football on Auburn. And I think they're going to take advantage of Peyton Thorne and make him uncomfortable all night. And I'll tell you this, man, for the future of Auburn, can't be making any crazy decisions. Like, I do think Hugh Freeze can be the guy that turns Auburn around. I do believe that. But he's got to make better decisions when it comes to his offense, and especially the players that he brings in. And we won't get into the Grace McCall crap because we don't have enough time and it ain't worth it. But at the end of the day, man, I think that fans hate the word patience, but I think that Auburn is going to do everything they can when it comes to going out this offseason and making sure they do not run into this quarterback problem over the next 2 years. It'll cost a little, but they're going to do it.
And you're paying all these buyouts. I mean, you got to stick with the coach, commit to him. He's recruiting well. You got to give him time for these recruiting classes to pan out. The quarterback thing's been a disaster, but I
mean, and his PR department's doing everything they can to get the guy to shut up on Tiger Talk and these post-game press conferences. And just don't say anything, bro. Like, just be quiet. Give a straight answer.
What did he say Monday? He said, sometimes I'm just being too honest, and they say I'm throwing people under the bus. Well, don't be so honest.
Yes, dude. Like, hold it back. Like, come on, man. Like, you don't need to say all this stuff. And then he said, and I love the jokes this past week. Okay, well, you're going to play Oklahoma 9 more times? Are you going to beat them 9 times? Like, you don't have to say that stuff to rile up a fan base that understands how bad the situation is. It's real simple.
Just stop turning the ball over. That's all fans want. I mean, win some games. They got to find 4 more. We'll see if they can do that on the schedule. He is Trey Wallace. Trey, let everybody know where they can find your stuff, man. Tremendous stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Chris. This has been fantastic, brother. Love the work that you guys do here on Locked On SEC. You can follow me on social media, X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, at Trey Wallace _. Follow all my work at outkick.com. And yeah, man, another crazy weekend coming up. Look forward to getting back on the road, and we're just getting started, man. As crazy as it sounds, we're only 1 month into this season, so we got 3.5 more to go. So everybody pace yourself. It's going to get crazier.
And a great video on Trey's Twitter where he ran into Kid Rock just shelling out hundreds to what was it, concession workers in Tuscaloosa.
People thought it was staged. Like, no, like just go back and look at my Twitter feed, folks, if you're watching this, okay? Like, I was literally walking from one side of the stadium to the next. I happened to see like these Secret Service guys come out of this little area, and they're walking Kid Rock, who's smoking a cigar and just being his cool, weird self, whatever. I'm holding my words back. But then the pretzel workers kept yelling at him, "Hey, please buy a pretzel from us. Please buy a pretzel." So I just took out my phone. I was like, "Oh, this is something cool. I videotape it. It's neat." And then all of a sudden he brings out this wad that I swear it looked like he had like $5,000, and just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And he goes, "Spread it around." And it's like, damn it, man. He is in such a better spot than I am. Like, I should have been like, "Hey, man, you want to give it to the media? Like, you want to help a brother out?" But yeah, so it was not some stage video, folks, out there for all you weird conspiracy theory folks. So, but yeah, man, crazy time. Please, Donald Trump, never come to a football game that I'm attending again, because it was absolute chaos getting around there. Yeah. So God bless America.
SEC Media Days next year, I'm going to bring a wad of cash, and I'm just going to start shelling it out like Kid Rock. We'll make that happen.
Screw you, Kid Rock. We're big ballers than you are, right?
Trey, great stuff, man. We'll do it again real soon. All right, appreciate the time.
Thank you, brother. Thank you for having me.
All right, that's Trey Wallace there of Outkick. Appreciate him taking some time. That is going to do it for this edition of Locked On SEC. Thank you guys for making us your first listen every day. Hey, for your second listen, you can check out our friend Spencer McLaughlin over at Locked On College Football. You can find it on YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcasts, and get all the latest news on the rest of the college football world. For Trey Wallace, I'm Chris Gordy. This has been Locked On SEC. Come on back tomorrow. We'll have all the latest updates going on around the SEC, latest news and everything right here on Locked On SEC.